رؤياي من قبل وقال يا أبت هذا تأويل رؤياي من قبل قد جعلها ربي حقا وقد أحسن بي إذ أخرجني من السجن وجاء بكم من البدو من بعد أن نزغ الشيطان بيني وبين إخوتي إن ربي لطيف لما يشاء إنه هو العليم الحكيم رب قد آتيتني من الملك وعلمتني من تأويل الأحاديث فاطر السماوات والأرض أنت وليي في الدنيا والآخرة توفني مسلما وألحقني بالصالحين ذلك من أنباء الغيب نوحيه إليك وما كنت لديهم إذ أجمعوا أمرهم وهم يمكرون وما أكثر الناس ولو حرصت بمؤمنين وما تسألهم عليه من أجر إن هو إلا ذكر للعالمين وكأي من آية في السماوات والأرض يمرون عليها وهم عنها معرضون وما يؤمن أكثرهم بالله إلا وهم مشركون أفأمنوا أن تأتيهم غاشية من عذاب الله أو تأتيهم الساعة بغتة وهم لا يشعرون قل هذه سبيلي أدعو إلى الله قل هذه سبيلي أدعو إلى الله على بصيرة أنا ومن اتبعني وسبحان الله وما أنا من المشركين. بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه أما بعد. So in our last halaqah we were just concluding the very final passages of Surah Yusuf, and we had actually finished the story of Prophet Yusuf Alehissalaam, except for the one dua that he makes right at the end. And this dua is what we're going to start off with today and then finish up half a paragraph, and inshallah hopefully by next halaqah we will completely finish Surah Yusuf and summarize some of the main points in Surah Yusuf. So we said that after he had raised his parents on the throne and after they had fallen down in sajda, he then makes a dua. He then mentions the blessings and the praises that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given him. He mentions the blessings without ever mentioning anything to do with his brothers. We mentioned the reason for that, because he's told his brothers, there is no criticism upon you after today. And so all of the blessings that he mentions, to be saved from the prison and to be saved from fitna, he doesn't mention anything to do with being in the well, anything to do with his brothers. And then he praises Allah Azza wa Jal for having guided his parents and brought his parents from the Bedouin livelihood into the cities. And then he makes a private dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the first paragraph is public. Now he makes a private dua and he says, Rabbi qad ataytani min al-mulk. Oh my Rabb. And we already clarified last halaqah, what is the meaning of Rabb? The meaning of Rabb, it has three meanings to it. The first meaning of Rabb is the owner. So you call out to the one who owns you, because ownership necessitates a responsibility. When you own your car, you have to take care of it. When you own something, you're the one that is in charge of it. So the first meaning of Rabb is ownership. The second meaning of Rabb is nourishment, and from it we get the word tarbiyah. That tarbiyah is a spiritual nourishment. So when you call out to Rabb, you're saying, oh, the one who takes care of me, oh, the one who will nourish me. And the third meaning of Rabb is Lord and Master, which means the one who is obeyed. These are the three meanings of Rabb. Once again, the first meaning of Rabb is owner. The second meaning of Rabb is nourisher, sustainer. And the third meaning of Rabb is the one who is obeyed. And this is why the name of Allah, Ar-Rabb, is one of the most comprehensive names of Allah. And this is why it is the most common name that is ever used in any dua. The most common name of Allah in any dua is Rabb. Rabbi zidni ilma, Rabbana atina fi dunya hasana, Rabbi habli hukma, Rabbi, all of these are Rabb, Rabb, Rabb. Why? Because when you call your Rabb, you're calling your owner, you're calling your master, you're calling your nourisher, and therefore He has to nourish and sustain you. He has to take care of you. Anything you ask, your owner has to give it to you. Anything you ask, your nourisher and sustainer has to give it to you, and therefore you invoke your Rabb. So he says, Rabbi, qad ataytani min al-mulki wa 'allamtani min ta'wil al-ahadith. He mentions two things. You have given me kingdom or power. قَدْ آتَيْتَنِي مِنَ الْمُلْكِ. You've given me something of power. وَعَلَّمْتَنِي مِنْ تَأْوِيلِ الْأَحَادِيثِ. And given me something of the knowledge of interpreting dreams. Why did he say something? Min and min. Because he's invoking the one who is Al-Malik and the one who is Al-Alim. So he's saying, oh Al-Malik, you've given me some mulk. Oh Al-Alim, you've given me some ilm. Because in contrast to Allah Azza wa Jal, who is He? What is His power? What is His knowledge? In contrast to everybody on earth, He is the most knowledgeable, no doubt. But now He is invoking Allah Azza wa Jal. And so He is saying, oh Allah, you've given me a little bit of your power. قَدْ آتَيْتَنِي مِنَ الْمُلْكِ وَعَلَّمْتَنِي مِنْ. Min here means a little bit. مِنْ تَأْوِيلِ الْأَحَادِيثِ. He is trivializing the knowledge that He has with min, because in comparison to Allah, that knowledge is trivial. In comparison to Allah, that power is nothing. Even though at this point in time, He is in fact the most powerful man on earth because He controls food and people are starving. He is the most powerful man on earth because, even more powerful than the king now, because He is the minister of food and people need food more than need anything else. And He is also the most knowledgeable person on earth. And it is very rare in the history of humanity that power and knowledge have been combined to perfection. Very rare. It is very rare that power and knowledge, and when knowledge is perfected, you get a prophet, right? The perfection of knowledge is prophethood. It is very rare that the prophets have also been rulers. And that is why our Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he is no doubt the most successful of all of Allah's messengers, even though they were all successful in their own way. But our Prophet ﷺ was the most successful because he combined al-mulk and al-ilm. And very few people before him had combined these two. Of those who combined partially was Musa alayhi salam. In that he was given some dominion, but he still did not ever see the Holy Land. Remember, Musa died in the Exodus when they were wandering around. He didn't actually see it, but nonetheless he had some political power. Isa alayhi salam did not have any political power, and he lived a different type of life. Ibrahim alayhi salam did not have that type of political power. Yet Yusuf alayhi salam and a few other prophets, of course Dawood and Sulaiman are the best examples as well in this regard. They were given mulk and ilm, and there is no doubt that this is the perfection, because what is the most prized possession of any human being? It is power. Because when you have power, everything follows, right? Fame, prestige, money, all of your lustful desires can be satisfied, whether it's food, whether it's drink, whether it's sensual pleasures. When you're king, when you're prime minister, everything else follows, right? All of the other pleasures of this dunya cannot compete with the pleasure of power. Because when you have power, everything else is subservient to that. So the greatest blessing of this world, if it is used properly, just purely worldly blessing, is power. And the greatest blessing of the spiritual realm is knowledge. And Yusuf alayhi salam is therefore mentioning the two blessings that Allah has given and perfected. رَبِّ قَدْ آتَيْتَنِي مِنَ الْمُلْكِ وَعَلَّمْتَنِي مِنْ تَأْوِيلِ الْأَحَادِيثِ. And of the knowledge, he mentions the most rare type of knowledge. And that is the knowledge of the interpretation of dreams. As we said over and over again, most knowledge is book learnt. You can memorize the Qur'an, you can study tafsir, you can study fiqh and hadith. And this knowledge is difficult to obtain, but nonetheless it is available. But there are a few knowledges, it is not something that you can even study and learn. It is a pure blessing from Allah Azza wa Jal. You can study for years and years. You're never going to master a science, a particular types of sciences, unless Allah has bestowed it upon you. And of the most important of these types of sciences is the interpretation of dream. And as I've said over and over again, all of these booklets that you find and all of these encyclopedias and websites, all of this is not worth the ink that it is printed on, by and large. Because dream interpretation is something that is a muhiba, a gift that Allah blesses you with. It is not something that you learn. And as I gave some examples as well, the same dream can be interpreted differently based upon which culture you're in, based upon who's seen the dream. The same symbol for one person will symbolize one thing, for another will symbolize something else. So you cannot just look it up in a book. It is something that is a God-given gift. And therefore Yusuf alayhi salam mentions the two most prized blessings that he has been given. And he begins the dua by mentioning these special blessings because he wants to, there's a number of reasons to do so. Firstly, to acknowledge his gratitude. And of the best ways to acknowledge gratitude is to mention. We do this all the time in our own lives. It's like, I appreciate the favor you've done for me, right? We thank the person when they've done something. You verbally thank them. This is we do it in our own lives. So of the ways you acknowledge Allah's gratitude is you say it. Oh my Lord, I know that you have blessed me with X, Y, Z. Oh my Lord, I know that you have given me a family, you've given me wealth, you've given me status. So you begin your dua by acknowledging Allah's favors upon you. This is the first point. The second point, by acknowledging Allah's previous favors, it is as if you are saying, oh Allah, you've given me this much, also give me this now. You're the one who's been so generous. And again, we find this in our world as well, that if somebody's been helpful, if there's a donor to the masjid, right? There's a donor to the masjid. The first person we go to when we need help with the masjid, we go to the donors because, akhi, you already gave, mashallah, last year you gave $50,000. This year we need this. Because his karam or his generosity has now been established, right? So we go to the people whom we know what their character is going to be like. وَلِلَّهِ الْمَثُلُ الْأَعْلَى. To Allah belongs the more perfect example. By mentioning these favors, it is as if Yusuf is saying, oh Allah, you gave me this, I know you'll give me this. This is how you begin the dua. And that is why one of the ways that we should make dua as well is by acknowledging Allah's favors on us. This is one of the ways that we begin our dua. We should begin our dua. And that is why the best dua for istighfar, the Prophet ﷺ said, Sayyidul istighfar. The dua that is the queen or the master of all the du'as of istighfar. How does it begin? One of the first phrases, Allahumma inni abu'u laka bi ni'matika alayya wa abu'u bi dhanbi. Oh Allah, I acknowledge all the blessings you've given me. This is how you begin the dua. The dua is for istighfar. It's going to come later on. Right now you need to acknowledge before you begin the dua. Oh Allah, I acknowledge all of the favors that you've given me, and I acknowledge my sins. And then you go on and you say, and therefore, oh Allah Azza wa Jal, forgive me. So he mentions these two. رَبِّ قَدْ آتَيْتَنِي مِنَ الْمُلْكِ وَعَلَّمْتَنِي مِنْ تَأْوِيلِ الْأَحَادِيثِ فَاطِرَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. فاطر السماوات والأرض. Fatir is of the names of Allah Azza wa Jal. Alhamdulillahi fatir السماوات والأرض. And almost always when the name occurs, it is always followed by as-samawati wal-ard. Fatir as-samawati wal-ard. We rarely find al-fatir. You find fatir as-samawati wal-ard. And what does fatir mean? Fatir means the originator. Fatir means the one who extracts and creates out of nothing. And the verb fatara literally means to carve in half and to split open. Because it is as if the person who created, extracted from nothing, he opened it, he cracked open the seed, let's say. He cracked open the egg, or he cracked open something, and then he took out what was needed, right? So the meaning, actual meaning of fatara is to crack open, to put a split, if you like. This is what fatara actually means. So fatir, it is as if Allah has cracked open, if you like, and of course this is a metaphorical meaning, Allah created from nothing. But the meaning here, it is as if Allah extracted or created or originated, this is the proper word in English, originated the heavens and the earth. Fatir as-samawati wal-ard. Now, by mentioning the specific blessings, you have given me power, you've given me knowledge. He then moves on to the general characteristic of Allah. You are the originator of the heavens and earth. He begins by mentioning specific blessings, and then he mentions general blessings. The specific blessing, you've given me something you've given nobody else. The general blessing, you are the creator and originator of the heavens and the earth. فاطر السماوات والأرض أنت وليي في الدنيا والآخرة. You are my wali in this world and the next. So he mentions two names of Allah, Fatir and Wali. He mentions two names of Allah in this verse, after of course having mentioned Rabb. That's already mentioned in the dua in the beginning, right? Rabb. So there's two names here, Fatir and Wali. What does Wali mean? Anta waliyi, he's saying, you are my wali in this world and in the next. Al-Wali is of the names of Allah Azza wa Jal as well. And Al-Wali and Al-Mawla are sister names. By sister names, I mean there are names of Allah Azza wa Jal that are overlapping and similar and derive from the same root. So, Al-Ghafir and Al-Ghafoor and Al-Ghaffar, for example. Al-Alim and Allamul Ghuyub, for example. Okay? So there's names of Allah Azza wa Jal that are similar, and there are very minor differences, and of them is Al-Wali and Al-Mawla. Al-Wali and Al-Mawla are from the same verb, Yali. And Yali means to be next to be right next to. And Al-Wali, therefore, literally, originally it means the one who is in your proximity. He's around you. And therefore, your supporters and your comforters and your family and your protectors, all of them in Arabic are called your wali. And therefore the Qur'an uses the terminology wali to talk about the one who takes care of orphans. You are the wali, whoever is the wali of the orphan. Because he's the one, he's monitoring and caring about them. And the Qur'an and Sunnah use the term wali to talk about the wali in the case of a nikah, a marriage. That a young woman who has never been married, she needs a wali. What is a wali here? A wali is a guardian. A wali is somebody who will care for her, protect her interests. Because he's protecting her interests, he is a wali. So Allah Azza wa Jal is not just a wali, he is al-wali. And al-wali, which means, as we said, Al-Wali it means he is the one who is protecting, caring. He is the one who is in close proximity to the believers. And he is the wali of the believers only. Allahu waliyul ladhina amanu. Allah is the wali of those who have iman. And Allah says in the Qur'an, قُلْ أَغَيْرَ اللَّهِ أَتَّخِذُ وَلِيًّا. Should I take any wali other than Allah? فَاطِرَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. The same wali and fatir mentioned in Surah Al-An'am right now. The same. The wali and fatir mentioned together, just like in Surah Yusuf. Why? Because fatir is the originator and the creator of the physical world, and al-wali is your guide and protector of the spiritual. Fatir, he's created the world around you. He is the physical owner, master, originator. And then he has to protect you spiritually as well. He has to take care of you and nourish you spiritually. Therefore, he is your wali. And also the name of Allah Azza wa Jal, Al-Mawla, many times Allah mentions the name Al-Mawla, Ni'ma Al-Mawla wa Ni'ma Al-Nasir. Allah is a sufficient Mawla and Allah is a sufficient protector. Nasir and Mawla paired together to show you what is the meaning of Mawla. And in the end of Surah Al-Baqarah, what is the last verse of Surah Al-Baqarah? Anta Mawlana. You are our Mawla. What does the Mawla do? فَانصُرْنَا عَلَى الْقَوْمِ الْكَافِرِينَ. This is the job of the Mawla. Because what is a wali? The one who's around you. He's in your proximity. He's caring for you, protecting you. Just like the wali in the nikah and the wali of the orphan. He's not caring about himself. He's caring about the one he's protecting. The meaning of wali in the nikah, the meaning of wali when you're taking care of orphan, his interests are the interests of the other party. He's going to protect the other party. And therefore, just like in the nikah, the example, we understand it. When you're the wali in somebody's nikah, in a woman's nikah, you will look at her interests. You will look at what will protect her. Therefore, وَلِلَّهِ الْمَثَلُ الْأَعْلَى, to Allah belongs the better example. When Allah is our wali, everything that happens, He's doing it for our own good. Because He's our wali. And so Yusuf ﷺ is saying, I know, O Allah, right at the end of the story, I know, O Allah, that all that has happened, you were protecting me. And you had a plan. You are my wali. I know this. Anta waliyi. You are my wali in this world and in the next. Now, by acknowledging Allah as a wali, there are once again two meanings here. The first meaning, it is a statement of fact that Yusuf ﷺ is acknowledging, I have iman that you're my wali. And the second is a dua. implicit in the statement of fact. Oh Allah, continue to remain my wali. I repeat, by saying Anta waliyyi fi dunya wal akhirah, Yusuf alayhi salam is acknowledging two things. The first of them, he's making a statement of fact. He is expressing his iman. Oh Allah, I know you are my wali. And so by expressing his iman, he's affirming his faith in Allah. And the second is that he is implicitly extracting a dua from Allah. Oh Allah, because you're my wali, protect me in this world and the next. So there's both a statement of fact and an implicit dua mentioned in there. Anta waliyyi fi dunya wal akhirah. And subhanAllah, look at what a beautiful name that Yusuf alayhi salam has chosen in light of his own story. And again, he is a prophet of Allah, he's going to choose the best name. He could have chosen Al-Khabir or Ghaffar, and all of these are appropriate. But by choosing Al-Wali, he is indicating, oh Allah, I know you protected me. That's what a wali does, protect. Oh Allah, I know you protected me throughout all of my trials. And because you protected me in this world, also protect me in the next. Anta waliyyi fi dunya wal akhirah. And in this as well, by acknowledging Allah's wilayah, by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this manner, the whole paragraph as of yet has been praise after praise after praise. رَبِّ قَدْ آتَيْتَنِي مِنَ الْمُلْكِ. You have given me the kingdom. وَعَلَّمْتَنِي مِنْ تَأْوِيلِ الْأَحَادِيثِ. You have taught me the knowledge of dreams. فَاطِرَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. The originator of the heavens and earth. أَنْتَ وَلِيِّي فِي الدُّنْيَا وَالْآخِرَةِ. You are my wali in this world and the next. Now comes the dua. After all of this praise, now his request comes. And this shows us, once again, the appropriate manner of making a dua. Once the Prophet ﷺ was passing by somebody who was making dua, and he raised his hands and he said, oh Allah, give me this and give me that. The Prophet ﷺ said, the man has been hasty. Sta'jal. He was hasty. He didn't do his job properly. So they said, what should he have done? So he mentioned a dua, and basically from it we derive that he should have praised Allah. He should have made tahmeed. He should have begun by expressing glory to Allah Azza wa Jal, and then worked his way to the dua. So it is a hasty dua. We're not saying it's wrong, but to fulfill a real dua, the proper etiquettes of dua, you raise your hands up to Allah and you begin by praising Allah. And you begin by acknowledging what Allah has given you. And you begin by praising Allah, a general praise and a specific praise. What is the general praise? فَاطِرَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. What is the specific praise in this dua? رَبِّ قَدْ آتَيْتَنِي الْمُلْكِ وَعَلَّمْتَنِي مِنْ تَأْوِيلِ الْأَحَادِيثِ. In our case, you think of what blessing Allah has given you. And you say, oh Allah, you have blessed me with a beautiful family. Oh Allah, you have given me this. Oh Allah, you have given me that. So you acknowledge Allah's blessings. And you praise Allah in a generic manner, meaning a general manner, and then you get to your dua. And what is the dua? توفني مسلما وألحقني بالصالحين. Cause me to die as a Muslim. توفني مسلما وألحقني بالصالحين. And allow me to join those who are righteous. Now, some people have misunderstood this verse, and they have misunderstood it to mean that Yusuf alayhi salam was asking for his own death. That he's raising his hands to Allah and he's saying, oh Allah, cause me to die right now. توفني مسلما. Give me death right now. And one of the scholars of the past, in this misinterpretation, he said, no one of the righteous ever wished for death amongst the prophets other than Yusuf. Because he's saying, tawaffani musliman, cause me to die. But the other scholars refuted this. The majority refuted this, said this is a misunderstanding. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ said, none of you should ever wish for death. None of you should ever wish for death. Because the life of the believer is nothing but good. When you die, khalas, your good deeds are closed. You're not going to get the amount of good that you're getting when you're alive. So the life of the believer only brings about more good. And therefore, how can a prophet of Allah wish for death when his life is nothing but good? And therefore, the majority interpretation and opinion is that Yusuf a.s. is not saying, oh Allah, cause me to die. Rather, he is saying, oh Allah, when death comes to me, let me be in the state of Islam. This is his dua. And this is clearly what Yusuf a.s. is intending. And even Allah Azza wa Jal himself says, فَلَا تَمُوتُنَّ إِلَّا وَأَنْتُمْ Muslimun. Do not die except in a state of Islam. This doesn't mean we should rush to death. It means we should be persistent in our Islam. Now this dua here, at the end, after all of this praise, it's again very profound. Why? Because after all of these blessings that he mentions, you've given me the kingdom, you've given me all of this knowledge, there is a blessing that is more precious to Yusuf than the kingdom and that knowledge. And that is Islam. The blessing of Islam is more precious to him than anything else. And wallahi, this is something that we should really think about, that we take Islam for granted so much. Wallahi, when's the last time? And I ask myself this and I ask you, when was the last time you genuinely praised Allah and thanked Him for being a Muslim? When was the last time that you genuinely raised your hands up to Allah and said, "Oh Allah, allow me to live as a Muslim and die as a Muslim"? This is what is on the mind of the Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam. He's been given the kingdom. He's been given a knowledge which is very, very rare. Even amongst the prophets, it's very rare. And yet, this is good, alhamdulillah, but there is a blessing that outshines and excels all of these blessings, and that is the blessing of Islam. Something that is so simple, we take for granted, but Yusuf alayhi salam understands how precious it is. So he says, allow me to die in the state of Islam. And of course, the point here is that allow me to persist in being a good Muslim until death comes to me. This is the meaning of allow me to die in the state of Islam. Nobody knows when death will come. So whenever death comes, allow me to be in that perfect state of Islam. وَأَلْحِقْنِي بِالصَّالِحِينَ, and cause me to join the righteous. Once again, a profundity here. He is worried about his companions in the next life. He is worried about who he's going to be, as we say in English, hanging around in the next life. Why? Because in the next life, there's only two categories, two camps. There's no middle camp. In this world, we have middle camps. In this world, we can choose. But in the next, everything is sifted. And therefore, he wants to be in the camp of the winners, not the camp of the losers. So he's saying, oh Allah, allow me to join the righteous. Now, as a prophet of Allah, he obviously is righteous. And he's asking Allah to be amongst the righteous. And there's no doubt that there's a hidden, or not a hidden is not good, but implicit dua that allow me to be with my forefathers who are also prophets. And my brothers who are now also prophets. Either they became prophets now or they became prophets later. So by making dua to Allah to be with the Salihin, he's also making dua to be with his own father and grandfather. And it is said in the books of history that Yaqub alayhi salam died and Yusuf was grief-stricken with his death, and he died shortly 2-3 years after his death. Yaqub lived a very long life, and Yusuf alayhi salam died shortly after his death, even though he might have lived much longer for the time period, but Allah Azza wa Jal had willed that he die shortly after his father. So this dua becomes even more meaningful, that, oh Allah, allow me to be with those who are righteous. And no doubt the first person that will come to mind is his own father. Also, of course, the concept here being, you will be with those whom you love. You will be with those whom you hang around. And the Prophet ﷺ said, الرَّجُلُ عَلَى دِينِ خَلِيلِهِ, the man will follow the religion or the methodology of his friends. So be careful who is your friend amongst you. So if you are with the Salihin in this world, chances are you're going to be with the Salihin in the next. And if you avoid the Salihin in this world, chances are you will not get to the Salihin in the next. And of the most important benefits that we derive from this paragraph is how to make dua, the etiquettes of dua, the sincerity of dua, and also what to make dua about. And as I said when I was giving the halaqah 2 days ago, that when you reach a high level of iman, your mind doesn't think about, oh Allah, give me $1 million, oh Allah, give me a fancy car. Your mind transcends such petty things. And here is Yusuf alayhi salam asking what we would consider the lowest common denominator amongst everything, and that is Islam. Right? For us, this is the lowest common denominator. Wallahi, I ask myself and you again, when was the last time you asked Allah for Islam? Right? You take it for granted. We take it for granted, isn't it? We ask Allah for this world. We ask Allah for matters that might not be as important. But Yusuf alayhi salam understands what is the most important. So this paragraph and this dua is a very, very profound paragraph that summarizes really the gist of the story. It summarizes the iman of Yusuf alayhi salam, and it summarizes what he's thinking about. He wants Islam in this world, he wants Jannah and Salihin in the next. And this also shows us one point here. Yusuf alayhi salam was a prophet. Yusuf alayhi salam was a prophet. There is no question that he would remain a prophet till he died. In other words, there's no question that he'll ever lose Islam. You understand what I'm saying here? As a prophet of Allah, you cannot commit shirk, right? As a prophet of Allah, you cannot commit kufr, or else you wouldn't be a prophet. Prophets are ma'soom, prophets are sinless, meaning they cannot commit the major sins. Yet, Yusuf ﷺ is asking for that which is guaranteed to him. This is what I'm trying to get at. Islam is guaranteed for him. He has no fear of losing it in the real sense. You understand what I'm saying here, right? There's no way that he can ever not be a Muslim. And yet, what is on his mind is, give me Islam. And this reminds us of Umar ibn al-Khattab, which is the most interesting story, one of the most interesting stories of Iman here, that the Prophet ﷺ told Umar that you are from the people of Jannah, right? He is one of the Ashara Mubashara, correct? Yet, 15 years later, he's begging Hudayfa, tell me, am I a munafiq that the Prophet ﷺ told you about or not? Do you see the contradiction here? If he truly believes in the Rasul ﷺ, he must also believe that he's going to Jannah, right? Because the Prophet ﷺ told him he's going to Jannah. But because his iman is at a level that is beyond something we can understand, he is, I don't like using the word paranoid, that's negative, but he is, what's a good word here? Overzealous is a better word. He is over concerned, more than needs to be, that the one thing that he has been guaranteed by the Rasul ﷺ, which is iman, he doesn't have it, right? He is worried about the impossible because of his own iman. And we see this in the story of Yusuf alayhi salam. You guys following this point here, right? That Yusuf is making a dua for something that in reality he doesn't need, but he's so eager for it because he knows this is all that he needs. Tawaffani musliman wa alhiqni bis salihin. And even our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the dua in Sahih Bukhari, Ya muqallib al-qulub, thabbit qalbi ala qulubana ala ta'atik, right? Ya muqallib al-qulub, oh the one who changes the hearts, make my heart firm in worshipping you. Now once again, can the Prophet of Allah ﷺ ever not be firm in worshipping Allah, right? Can that ever happen? Can he ever, astaghfirullah, it's not even possible, right? Yet, this is the dua that he's making. Ya muqallib al-qulub, thabbit qulubana ala ta'atik, or thabbit qalbi ala dinik. It's not even conceivable that our Prophet ﷺ will not be upon the deen of Allah. It's not conceivable. But what is his dua? Make my heart firm in your deen, O Allah. Because once again, it is that level of iman. And we have the same in the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam, right? The story of Ibrahim alayhi salam, when he makes a dua, what is his dua? That, اجنبني وبني أن نعبد الأصنام. The worst sin is the worship of idols, correct? And it is not conceivable that a prophet of Allah can worship an idol. Yet when he's standing in front of the Kaaba, he's finished building the Kaaba, and he's standing with his son Ismail alayhi salam, and he's filled with awe. What is the dua on his mind? Make me of your Hanif, make me of your worshippers, and save me from ever worshipping an idol. Once again, the impossible. But when you get to that level of iman, this is what you're worried about. Now, for the moral from all of this, if this is the dua of Yusuf alayhi salam, of our Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, and they are guaranteed, well then where do you think I am and you are? Right? Where do you think I am and you are? How much sincerely do you think we should be making dua, we who have absolutely no guarantee at all? Should we not be making this dua with so much zeal and vigor? Ya muqallib al-qulubi thabbit qalbi ala dinik. Tawaffani musliman wa alhiqni bis salihin. Right? And yet, as I say, when was the last time we made a dua for something that we consider to be the lowest common denominator? So, in this beautiful dua of Yusuf alayhi salam, we have the affirmation of Tawheed, the perfection of Allah's names and attributes, the pure submission to Allah Azza wa Jal, that make me of those who submit to you. We see that his dying wish is to die as a submitter or as a worshipper of Allah Azza wa Jal. And with this comprehensive dua, the story, the actual story of Yusuf alayhi salam finishes, and the surah goes on for around a page or so. Today we will only do around half of that page, even less than half, subhanAllah. Today we'll do a little bit, and then inshallah next week we'll try to finish up, inshallah. But just to finish up some loose ends here, it is said that Yaqub alayhi salam, now realize now that Yaqub was living in the land of Canaan, which is now called Palestine. And he had been promised this land, but he had not yet cultivated it. He was living in the wilderness. He was living in a barren valley, if you like. He had been promised this land, but he had not been taken over it. He was living as a Badu. And so when the drought happens, when people are dying, you cannot live in this land, Yusuf ﷺ calls them back. And Yusuf calls them to Egypt and gives them a luscious life, gives them a beautiful life. But they know that this is a temporary phase and they have to eventually go back to the promised land. And so Yaqub alayhi salam gives the wasiyah. It is said, these are the books that we find in our books, Allah knows how true this is or not, about Yaqub. He gives the wasiyah that bury me as close as possible to the promised land in Egypt. In other words, go to the border and bury me there. As for Yusuf alayhi salam, he made an even more stricter wasiyah. Now this is an authentic hadith, so we know this for sure. Yusuf alayhi salam, when he died, when he was on his deathbed, he took a covenant with his children. He took a treaty with it. He made them promise that whenever Allah tells you to return to the Holy Land, you must take my body and my corpse and travel with it and bury me in the Holy Land. He made a promise to his children to do this. Now, hundreds of years went by between Yusuf and Musa. Yusuf ﷺ came, there were 75 people. By the time they leave, they're probably 250,000 or something, right? We don't know exact, but at least 250,000 to 500,000. We have a huge number of people now in the actual Exodus. So, hundreds of years go by. And our hadith tell us that when Musa ﷺ tried to leave, he was physically prevented from doing so. His mount, there was a physical, invisible barrier. He could not go. And he knows this is from Allah Azza wa Jal. He knows something is happening. So he asks the people, what is going on? And somebody tells him, well, there is a legend that we know. There is a story that we've heard that Yusuf, now this is hundreds of years later, that Yusuf alayhi salam made a promise with his progeny that they could not leave the land except with his body. So Musa alayhi salam said, where is he buried? They said, we don't know. It's been hundreds of years, 500 years. We don't know. So they went through every single house and every single person of the children of Israel until they came across a very old lady from of the descendants of Yusuf alayhi salam. And she said, yes, I remember my forefathers telling me, I remember that he's buried in this location. So they went to that location, they dug up the body, and they then carried it with them for over 40 years in the wilderness until finally they arrived in the Holy Land and they were buried. He was buried over there. And as for Musa alayhi salam as well, Musa alayhi salam, as you all know the story, that he was not he wasn't alive when they entered the Holy Land, right? Because of the 40 years exodus that they were given. So Musa alayhi salam was wandering in the wilderness and he died in the wilderness. But Allah Azza wa Jal told Musa alayhi salam that he's about to die. So he told the angel of death, take my soul in an area where I can at least see the Holy Land. So he climbed up a hill and overlooking them was the Holy Land. And so he died over there and he was buried by the angels over there. So there is clearly this concept and notion that the people of Israel knew that they would return to Al-Ard al-Muqaddas or to the Holy Land. And our Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam also knew this, and that's why he told his progeny to take his body to the Holy Land. So this is the conclusion of the actual story of Yusuf alayhi salam. The surah goes on, and the next verse says, ذَلِكَ مِنْ أَنْبَاءِ الْغَيْبِ. This is of the news of the ghaib. The word ذَلِك, I think I've already mentioned in the very first class. What's the difference between هذا and ذَلِك? The distance. هذا is over here, and ذَلِك is over there, right? And by using the word ذَلِك, Allah Azza wa Jal is elevating the story. ذَلِكَ مِنْ أَنْبَاءِ الْغَيْبِ. The story is right here, we just finished it. I mean, technically to say هذا might be more precise linguistically in the sense you've just finished the story, right? But by saying ذَلِك, Allah Azza wa Jal is showing the majesty of the story. Allah Azza wa Jal is elevating the rank. We just finished it, it's connected, the verse, yet Allah uses ذَلِك to mention or to indicate how exalted the story is. ذَلِكَ مِنْ أَنْبَاءِ الْغَيْبِ. All of this is from min. The word here min is from. The knowledge of the ghaib that we have inspired to you. نُوحِيهِ إِلَيْكَ مَا كُنْتَ تَعْلَمُهَا أَنْتَ وَلَا قَوْمُكَ مِنْ قَبْلِ هَذَا ذَلِكَ مِنْ أَنْبَاءِ الْغَيْبِ نُوحِيهِ إِلَيْكَ وَمَا كُنْتَ لَدَيْهِمْ. And you were not with them إِذْ أَجْمَعُوا أَمْرَهُمْ وَهُمْ يَمْكُرُونَ. When they gathered together to plot against Yusuf alayhi salam. Now Allah Azza wa Jal mentions one incident in the whole story. When they gathered together to plot against Yusuf. Why does he mention this one instance? He doesn't say the Prophet ﷺ was not with them in the palace of the king. The Prophet ﷺ was not with them when he was in the well. The Prophet ﷺ was not in them when they were going from Egypt to Palestine. Why doesn't he mention all of these? Why does he mention one point? And that is, you were not with them when they gathered together to plot against Yusuf. Who can give me a wisdom? Do you understand the question here? It was the most secret point of the whole story. Nobody knew it. It was, they intended to make a secret out of it. And they hid from everybody else. And nobody could ever have told of the conversation in the beginning of the surah that they had other than Allah Azza wa Jal. Nobody could ever have told of this other than Allah Azza wa Jal. And so Allah Azza wa Jal is saying, وَمَا كُنْتَ لَدَيْهِمْ. You weren't there. إِذْ أَجْمَعُوا أَمْرَهُمْ وَهُمْ يَمْكُرُونَ. When they gathered together while they were plotting and planning against Yusuf. The most secretive of all gatherings in the whole story, Allah signifies that. Now, what is the purpose of saying you weren't there? Why is Allah saying you weren't there? Of course, the Prophet ﷺ knows he wasn't there. Why is Allah addressing him by saying you weren't there? Allah Azza wa Jal is addressing the world through him. And Allah Azza wa Jal is asking mankind to think, where do you think these stories have come from? Of the greatest miracles of our Prophet ﷺ is the fact that the Qur'an mentions these stories. Now, I need to impress upon all of you the society at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. The world at the time of the Prophet ﷺ was a world that many of us would not understand, because we're living in a very modern world now. The best I can say is, imagine in the jungles of Africa that are still in our times cut off from electricity and the internet. I'm sure there's still places like this, right? In the places maybe in Australia where there's still people, maybe the original Aborigines living, I don't know if they still live like that, but I'm just saying, imagine from such a place, imagine if somebody came forth in our times, he was discovered in the middle of the desert, having no education, not speaking the languages of the people around, having no library, having access to no books, and yet he is, let's say, a computer programmer or a doctor, something like this. Give you a ridiculous example, just to give you an example. How is this possible? One will be amazed, what is happening? How is this humanly possible? Well, our Prophet ﷺ did something infinitely more miraculous. We need to understand that Arabia was literally a barbaric society. It wasn't even civilized, right? There was no government. One of the signs of the most uncivilized people is what? A lack of government, right? Isn't that true, right? Government is the basic level of civilization, correct? The Arabs didn't even have a government, right? Every single tribe is warring against the other. There's no unified government. There's no law. There's no order. They don't have a script with which to write. You all know basic Arabic was so confusing, even Arab experts now could not read that Arabic, right? There's no nuqat, no tashkil. In Mecca, there were probably 10 people who knew how to read and write. We can estimate roughly from the sources, around 10 people in the whole city of at least 1,000 who know how to read and write. In this, and there's no library. In the whole Arabian Peninsula, there's not a single library. There's no book written in Arabic at this time. Not one book written in Arabic. What did they write? They only wrote mu'allaqat, right? Mu'allaqat al-sab'a, you must have studied the 7 poems. One sheet of paper. This is what they wrote. They did not have volumes at the time. This was their civilization. They didn't even have houses of 2 stories. I mean, can you imagine such a primitive society? And within 100 years, it will become the leader of the world. That's a separate story. But for now, in this primitive society, which has no connection with Judaism and Christianity. In Mecca, there were no Jews and Christians. Unlike Khaybar, unlike Yemen, yes, there were. In Mecca, there were no Jews and Christians. The people of Mecca are not growing up on the stories of Joseph and Jacob and Mary and Jesus. That's not their culture. That's the culture of the Romans. That's the culture of other societies. The Prophet ﷺ has been raised in Mecca, born in Mecca. And yet, here he comes forth with a book, the likes of which beats any eloquence that their poets have. They're fine, civilized, cultured poets. The language is beyond this world. It literally is beyond this world. The power, the beauty, the profundity, and for this purposes of this ayah, the content. Where did he get it from? Allah says in the Qur'an, وَمَا كُنْتَ تَتْلُو مِنْ قَبْلِهِ مِنْ كِتَابٍ وَلَا تَخُطُّهُ بِيَمِينِكَ إِذًا لَارْتَابَ الْمُبْطِلُونَ. You never used to write books before this. You never used to recite poetry before this. If you had done so, perhaps those who doubt would have a reason to doubt. Now, there's another point. For 40 years, the Prophet ﷺ never once gave a line of poetry. He never once was known for literature. He was known for honesty, he was known for character, he was known for bravery, but he wasn't known for literature, was he, right? Instantaneously, overnight, and this is again something that's not humanly possible. You cannot become a doctor, you cannot become a computer programmer, you cannot become an expert in anything without experience, correct? Even to drive a car, even to do anything, you need experience. Our Prophet ﷺ, Allah is telling us, overnight, he begins to spread a revelation, teach a message, recite stories. مَا كُنْتَ تَعْلَمُهَا أَنْتَ وَلَا قَوْمُكَ مِنْ قَبْلِ هَذَا. Neither you nor your people before you had access to these stories. And what is really amazing, many of the details of these stories are not even found in the Old Testament. They're not even found there. They're only found in the Qur'an. Many of them are found, yes, but many of them are not found. And this is even more amazing because if there was complete parallel, then you could have said, and this is a theory that used to be popular 100 years ago, that the Prophet ﷺ copied from the Bible. But now no serious researcher says this because there's so much differences. And the story and the format and the details, there's clearly no direct copying going on. Not at all. And more impressive than this is that there was no access. The first Arabic translation of the Bible, I did a paper on this a few years ago. The first Arabic translation of the Bible was around 180 Hijrah or something, right? Very much later on, way after Islam came. Before this point in time, there's not even an Arabic Bible. So the question is, where then did an illiterate, unschooled man in the middle of a peninsula that was a wild peninsula, far from the cultures of Rome and Persia, where did he get this from? And this is what Allah is saying in the Qur'an. تِلْكَ مِنْ أَنْبَاءِ ذَلِكَ مِنْ أَنْبَاءِ الْغَيْبِ. This is of the knowledge of the ghaib. نُوحِيهِ إِلَيْكَ. We are the ones who inspire you. We are the ones who... So this is a miracle of Allah Azza wa Jal by telling us the story of Yusuf alayhi salam. If you remember, way many months ago when we started the story, I said one of the stories that is given for why this surah was revealed is that the Quraysh sent a delegation to the Ahl Kitab of Medina, telling them that we have a prophet amongst us, or we have somebody who claims to be a prophet. What can we do to prove that he's not a prophet? So the Ahl Kitab, or the Yahud there, they said, test him with a number of questions. And they gave a number of questions. One of them was, test him to tell if he can tell you the story of Yusuf and the strange things that happened to him. Because the Ahl Kitab knew that nobody knows this except for us. And they themselves as well did not have their libraries in Medina. They didn't have their, this is oral tradition and it's secret, only they know it. And this is another city, 2 weeks journey away from Mecca. And the Prophet has never been to Medina as an adult at this time. So they go to the Quraysh and they say, ask him the story of Yusuf. So they ask him the story of Yusuf. What happens? Allah reveals Surah Yusuf. And then Allah concludes the story by saying, this is of the knowledge of the ghaib that we inspire it to you. You weren't there. What's going to happen though? The next verse, وَمَا أَكْثَرُ النَّاسِ وَلَوْ حَرَصْتَ بِمُؤْمِنِينَ. But most of mankind will not believe, even if you're eager for their belief. In other words, Allah Azza wa Jal is concluding this story by talking about its miraculous aspects. How did you get this story? It came from us. And this is a clear sign that you are a truthful prophet. Yet, most of mankind will not accept it. And to this day, by the way, the same challenge applies. And as you know, I'm studying academia as well. I find it very interesting how various people try to interpret the life of the Prophet ﷺ, how the non-Muslims who reject our Prophet ﷺ, how do they explain his lifestyle? How do they explain his reasons, his mannerisms? And to be honest, there is no feasible explanation that they have. There's nothing that's sensible. And to this day, there's a lot of theories. Where did he get this from? And the people say he might have gone to Syria, he might have gone this, he might have gone that. But all of this is conjecture. They're not willing to acknowledge the most logical possibility. And it is the most rational possibility. And that is, it came to him from the ultimate source, and that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah is saying, وَمَا أَكْثَرُ النَّاسِ وَلَوْ حَرَصْتَ بِمُؤْمِنِينَ. Even though it is so clear that this Qur'an is from Allah, even though it is so clear that you are getting wahi, most of mankind will not believe, despite the fact that you want them to believe. And this clearly shows us the mentality of our Prophet ﷺ. He wanted good for his ummah. He wanted khair for his ummah. وَلَوْ حَرَصْتَ. And haris means to be extra eager. Haris means to be extra passionate about something. And Allah Azza wa Jal uses this word exactly for our Prophet ﷺ in Surah Tawbah. لَقَدْ جَاءَكُمْ رَسُولٌ مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ عَزِيزٌ عَلَيْهِ مَا عَنِتُّمْ حَرِيصٌ عَلَيْكُمْ. There has come to you a prophet amongst you. He finds it difficult to see your pain. Azizun alayhi ma anittum. If you're in pain, he will find it difficult. Harisun alaykum. He's ever protective, ever careful, ever loving towards you. Bil mu'minina ra'ufun rahim. These are two attributes of Allah with the alif lam. Ar-ra'uf, ar-rahim. You take them out, and our Lord ascribed them to our Prophet ﷺ, that the Rasul is ra'uf and rahim. The Rasul is extra merciful and extra compassionate, as much as humanly possible. As much as humanly possible, he is ra'uf and rahim. And so Allah Azza wa Jalla himself calls our Rasul ﷺ harisun alaykum. He's ever eager to help you and guide you. And our Prophet ﷺ also explained in one hadith, he said that my example with my nation and my people, meaning the Quraysh, is that I see them trying to go or jump into the fire, and I'm holding on to their, the English would be belt here. They had something over here they would put, it's basically the belt. I'm holding on to their belts, trying to drag them out, and they want to try to disobey me and jump into the fire. He's describing his relationship with the people. That's my example. That I don't care if they're acting foolishly, I have to try to save them. And this is what Allah Azza wa Jalla is saying. I know you're eager for your people. I know you want to guide your people, but it's not your job. إِنَّمَا عَلَيْكَ الْبَلَاغُ وَعَلَيْنَا الْحِسَابُ. Your job is to convey. Our job is to judge. And in Surah Al-Kahf, Allah Azza wa Jalla uses a very, very blunt and frank verse. لَعَلَّكَ بَاخِعُ نَفْسَكَ أَلَّا يَكُونُوا مُؤْمِنِينَ. باخع means you might, and this is a really harsh word here, you might die of frustration. This is what bakhir means. You might literally die of anguish if they don't accept Iman. In other words, Allah is saying to the Prophet to calm down, that he's so worried, that he's so thinking about and so loving and so caring for his people. لَعَلَّكَ بَاخِعٌ نَفْسَكَ. You might kill yourself in this grief. This is the meaning here. That your grief will drive you almost to death, that they don't accept Iman. And so the hirs, or the eagerness of our Prophet ﷺ, is clearly mentioned in the Qur'an and in the Sunnah. And also a benefit from this verse here is that most of mankind will not believe. وَمَا أَكْثَرُ النَّاسِ. And I want us to think about this profoundly, especially in the times that we live in, is that many of us really have a very naive understanding of da'wah. Many of us really think, oh, let me just give him a few Didat cassettes or Zakir Naik CDs or whatnot, or maybe I myself might practice at home a little bit and, try with my workers here and there and just, quote a few verses and chapter this and that, and that's it, he's gonna all convert. Ya akhi, the Prophet ﷺ preached for 23 years. And for the first 13 of those years, most of mankind rejected him. Most of mankind, when they're living with him, eating with him, walking with him, seeing the miracles, they did not accept him. Do you think that I will be more effective and you will be more effective than he was? This is the sunnah of Allah Azza wa Jal. Look at the history of all the prophets. Jesus Christ Alehissalaam, his own people rejected him. Yahya, his own people killed him. Musa Alehissalaam, his own people mocked him. His own. Forget the outsiders, right? How about then our Prophet ﷺ and the other prophets? So the point being, Allah has given us the general rule. What is the general rule? People want to live animalistic lifestyles, hedonistic lifestyles. Most of these people, Allah is saying, إِنْهُمْ إِلَّا كَالْأَنْعَامِ, that they're living, all they're worried about is their animalistic desires. They just want to eat and drink and have a good time. And when you come to them with the truth, It's too difficult to follow the truth. It's too difficult to live. And wallahi, we talk about non-Muslims. How about Muslims? How about Muslims? For every one of us sitting in this masjid, in this city, there are at least 40, 50 who we never see in the masjid. Why should we talk about non-Muslims when we have people, Muslims, that we know, our friends, our relatives, our acquaintances, and even ourselves? How many amongst us know the truth and yet we find it difficult to follow? So Allah Azza wa Jal is giving us just the status quo. That no matter how eager you are, Ya Rasulullah, no matter how much you want to guide them, وَمَا أَكْثَرُ النَّاسِ وَلَوْ حَرَصْتَ بِمُؤْمِنِينَ. The majority of people, even if you want it, are just not going to be guided. And this shows us that the truth does not necessarily lie in the majority. The majority can say something. Well, this is within Islam, outside of Islam. The truth is independent of numbers. The truth is independent of numbers and of quantity. The truth is quality. Sometimes it has quantity, such as in the time of the Sahaba, and sometimes it doesn't. And this is a verse that clearly shows us that if 20 people, 50 people, they all want to propagate something, it doesn't necessarily make it the truth. The truth is different than what the majority might necessarily say. And I think time is subhanAllah up, and I was hoping to finish 2-3 more verses, but inshaAllah bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, next week I hope to finish up Surah Yusuf, and then we will do 1 or 2 open halaqas, and we'll decide them when they come, and then we'll take 1 week break. I'm not going to be here, and then inshaAllah we'll begin with our seerah, and that will be a very, very detailed and long analysis of the seerah. I have done the seerah 4 times before, and every time I make it a little bit longer. I haven't finished even one of them yet, by the way, because every community I go to, I leave before I finish it. So make dua that inshallah everything goes easy, and then we can. In Houston I did it for 2 years, and Connecticut I did it for 2.5 years. It's what? It's my favorite topic, and it is a topic that everybody loves and enjoys, from the young to the old. And it's something that I think is very unique, because I actually go back to the original sources for the seerah. I don't rely on any one book. I go back to the most classical and ancient books, and alhamdulillah I have them, and I go back and analyze even from the isnad point of view to a little bit which stories are authentic, which ones are not, and then we talk about morals and lessons that we can benefit from, and especially make it relevant to our time and era. That will happen on the 27th of April, is that right? The last week of April we will start inshallah, but we will have regular halaqas until then, except for the week before that one. I won't be here on, let me just checking out. Yes, the 27th of April we will start the seerah, so please do spread the word with that. The 20th of April I won't be here, but until then, next week and the 2 weeks after that, inshallah, we'll finish Surah Yusuf, and then maybe do some small surahs. I was thinking of the Qur'an, maybe some Juz Amma surah, so we get a taste of tafsir, a different type of tafsir. And then inshallah, we'll begin the long Surah Yusuf, the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. With that, if there are any questions, inshallah, we can take them now. Yes?